There is panic in the Kremlin due to a logistics collapse. In the Rostov region, Ukrainians destroyed an important railway hub. The Ukrainian army is preparing its strength. Powerful attacks. A sensational statement from Commander-in-Chief Syrsky. In occupied Donetsk, there is a catastrophe with the water supply, and enraged people are taking to the streets in protest. Russians are starting to wake up, dissatisfaction with Putin is sharply increasing, and a revolution may be on the horizon. For the first time in 17 years, the US has deployed powerful nuclear weapons. In Britain, what are they preparing for? Hello, my name is Anastasia Dmitrovskaya, and right now we'll talk about the main news. But first, please like this video if you support Ukraine, and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose each other on this vast platform, YouTube. And now, to the news from the front. According to deep state data, the enemy has advanced in the Donetsk region, specifically near Oleksandrivka, Kumri, Voskresenka, Kadylivka, Torske, Karpivka, and, according to the General Staff, there were 167 combat clashes recorded on the front line over the past day. The defense forces of Ukraine engaged with the occupiers. The situation remains tense in the Donetsk and Pokrovsk directions. In the Donetsk area, the Russians carried out 13 attacks in the regions of Delivka, Donetsk, Oleksandro Kalinove, and Rusin Yar. In the Pokrovsk direction, Ukrainian defenders repelled 74 assault actions. And let me remind you, all of this happened in a single day. And these images are simply heartbreaking. In the village of Torske, in the Donetsk region, Russian occupiers shot a local resident who was simply riding his bicycle. According to Ukrainian military reports, the occupiers deliberately shot the civilian, finishing him off with additional gunfire. Soldiers of the 63rd Separate Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces documented the crimes and eliminated 3 Russians involved in the killing. About the reserve the Russians are throwing into battle and the changing nature of the war. In comparison with 2022 and 2023, Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council,
there is a massive saturation of the battlefield with drones, the ability to spend 1 drone per person, per soldier, and sometimes even 2 drones per person. Accordingly, you can spend that much on a single soldier. This has made the war, much more difficult compared to 2023 and 2022, because you can't just drive up to the front line in a vehicle anymore. There aren't enough motorcycles, and even those are being destroyed. Ordinary vehicles that the enemy tried to use to get closer to the line of contact are also quickly taken out. They have to walk 10 or even 15 kilometers on foot.
In addition, Kovalenko spoke about the tactics of assault groups and the division of the front into zones.
Accordingly, the war has shifted to the activity of small assault groups of 5 to 10 people, sometimes up to 15, who try to choose different sections and crawl forward. Right now in Dnipropetrovsk, this strategy can be seen very clearly. Yes, sometimes the enemy manages to crawl closer to a position somewhere. These assault groups, as it turns out, are being destroyed by drones. So in any case, that's the nature of the war. So the enemy is trying to burn through this reserve that he has accumulated just to show at least some kind of progress.
And near Rostov, the Ukrainian Armed Forces have destroyed the occupiers' logistics hub. And in Novocherkassk, Rostov region, the railway infrastructure used for the military-industrial complex and the Russian army was attacked. This was reported on Telegram by Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council. According to him, this logistics hub connects strategic directions: Rostov-on-Don, Voronezh, Shuvolgograd, Kamensk-Shakhtinsky. And it is through this hub that equipment, ammunition, fuel, resources and personnel are transferred to the border with Ukraine.
It's all quite simple. War is logistics. The new reserves that Russia is throwing into the fight in the east are brought in by rail: ammunition, equipment, fuel, all delivered by rail as well. When logistics are disrupted, the enemy's ability to throw reserves into battle slows down.
Ukrainians are fighting heroically and holding back the Russian army, which has numerical superiority and plenty of reserves. Write words of support for the Ukrainian defenders. In the comments, we know for sure that they are watching us. Syrsky asks Trump to move the war onto Russian territory. The commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Alexander Syrsky, spoke with journalists from the Washington Post, where he specifically called for weapons and the so-called green light for strikes on Russian territory. Ukraine urgently needs the United States and Europe to transfer weapons to Kyiv. More air defense systems and missiles, said the commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, General Alexander Syrsky, in an interview with the Washington Post. And without the Biden-era ban on deep strikes against Russian military targets, in fact, Syrsky's appeal came against the backdrop of the constant terror inflicted by the Russians on Ukrainian cities. According to Syrsky, new deliveries of air defense weapons, including American Patriot missiles, interceptor drones and light aircraft for shooting down drones, could help prevent Russian attacks. More medium and long-range missiles, including American ATACMS systems and German Taurus systems, if released without restrictions, would allow Kyiv to slow down Russian weapons production by attacking the infrastructure where missiles and drones are manufactured. In addition, Syrsky stated that Ukraine has highly motivated and brave soldiers who can advance, but these soldiers need modern and reliable means of protection. Apart from the lack of air defense and missile weaponry, Ukraine's ground forces remain significantly outnumbered. On the front line, there is also a shortage of 155mm artillery shells, Syrsky said, and there is a need for additional supplies of armored vehicles. Syrsky also mentioned the Kursk operation. And even though after a rapid breakthrough, Ukrainian forces had to retreat, Commander-in-Chief Syrsky still considers the Kursk operation a success. According to Syrsky, during the occupation of Kursk, at least 80,000 Russian servicemen were killed or wounded. He refused to disclose Ukrainian losses, but said they are significantly lower than the Russian ones. And what about you? Do you agree with Commander-in-Chief Syrsky's statements regarding bringing the war onto Russian territory? And do you consider the Kursk operation successful, despite the fact that the defense forces had to leave the captured territories? Donetsk, Makivka and Mariupol are without water. In the so-called DPR, they announced that in Donetsk and Makivka, water will be supplied according to a schedule every 3 days. However, according to local residents, in some areas there is no water at all. It's been over a week. The critical situation with water supply remains in Snizhne, Yanakivske and Shakhtinske, Katarsk. The head of the Center for the Study of Occupation, Petro Andriushenko, reported that following Donetsk, restrictions on water supply are also being introduced in Mariupol.
Well, here it is, improvements from where we least expected. Following Donetsk, water supply in Mariupol will be available only once every 2 days, for a whole 4 hours at that. Local collaborators explained this as a problem with electricity, although in reality, the issue of water shortages is much deeper. I wrote about this just a few days ago. Here's why problems with electricity will arise and how this is connected to the water supply, and what in fact is currently happening with the reservoirs in Mariupol, or why the crisis is inevitable.
Blogger Denis Kazansky is also writing about the water situation in Donbas.
Russian war correspondents are writing about the water catastrophe in Donbas and are spreading appeals from local residents to Putin. Notably, the locals in their appeal don't mention any kind of water blockade, as they know very well that the water problems are not because of Ukraine. They say directly that the problem is corruption and negligence of the occupation administration, that the promised water pipeline was never built. The current situation is what they call a disaster. I have a simple solution. To solve the issue, just get the hell out of Donbass already. Ukraine will return, and with it, normal life will return too. Before you came, there was no water catastrophe at all. The catastrophe arrived together with Russia.
But, as they say, water isn't the only problem. Blogger Denis Kazansky also writes about the critical situation in occupied Alchevsk. According to him, the city is literally being poisoned by emissions. The local metallurgical plant, see for yourself,
and now it poisons the whole city with its emissions, turning it into a gas chamber. A foul-smelling plume of smoke constantly hangs over Alchevsk, and a layer of soot settles on the houses. The concentration of harmful emissions in the air is off the charts. Local residents write in their complaints that it has never been this bad before.
Well, I can't help but agree with Kazansky. All this disaster came to the occupied territories together with Russia. That's why people there don't live, they just survive. Just as, in fact, it is in Russia itself under Tsar Putin. I know that we have viewers not only in Ukraine, so let us know which country you're watching from and whether you support the Ukrainians' fight against the empire. Putin's evil. I always enjoy reading your comments. In the next few months, the states will have more ammunition than any country has ever had. In fact, Donald Trump has announced a significant increase in the US arsenal in the coming months. According to Trump, the relevant decision has already been approved by the US House Appropriations Committee.
In a few months, we will have more ammunition than any country has ever had. We will have more missiles than any country has ever had. We will have all the high-speed missiles. We will have fast ones, slow ones, accurate ones, and less accurate ones. We have everything, but there will be more ammunition than any country has ever had. This is very important to me. All right.
And what do you think are the states preparing in this way for some specific threat? For example, from Russia? Or is this more a case of if you want peace, prepare for war? In Austria, a 73-year-old man raped a 13-year-old girl from Ukraine who was fleeing the war with her family. The APA publication reports that the man raped the girl over an extended period of time. On Tuesday, the 22nd of July, the Regional Court of Corneoburg sentenced an Italian citizen to 8 years in prison for the aggravated rape of a minor. According to the indictment, the man committed numerous sexual assaults against the girl over an extended period, starting when she was 13 years old. The pensioner was also found guilty of abuse of authority, as he was acting as the guardian of the underage victim. Interestingly, the man does not consider himself guilty, while the court regarded his confession to sexual contact with the child and the victim's consent as mitigating circumstances. The verdict, as reported by journalists citing the court's decision, is not final. The report also notes that the girl is currently pregnant. There are in fact a lot of questions in this story. It's curious how the child ended up alone with the rapist. How did it happen that no one noticed or intervened in the ongoing abuse? The question of where the girl's parents actually were remains open. In short, we will continue to follow this story and will provide more details in our upcoming episodes. Ukraine is ready to open up arms exports. Currently, there is an ongoing discussion about resuming the physical export of Ukrainian weapons abroad. It is reportedly about exports with certain restrictions, and according to Valentin Badrak, director of the Center for Army Research, Conversion and Disarmament, they could be opened in the near future. Currently, the creation of an updated system for the export of arms and technologies under state supervision is being considered. There is insider information that UPRISING will be handling this export. Moreover, they are even naming the new head of the company. On the 9th of June, the contract of the previous head was completed, which is why it was not extended, and apparently they have decided to open up exports. I think this will be announced soon, or nothing will happen. It will be announced, but exports will resume, as the director of the Center for Army, Conversion and Disarmament Studies. So actually, what restrictions are we talking about? This is also confirmed by our sources in the government, who call this topic very delicate. According to their information, one of the likely scenarios is to allow the export of surplus production in certain categories for which the Ukrainian military is already fully supplied, and possibly to exchange these surpluses for the partner weapons that the armed forces of Ukraine need most. It is important to know that Ukraine is currently exporting technologies. Exporting technologies means that a branch is established or a partner is found in another country, which then manufactures and sells weapons produced using Ukrainian technologies. So whether Ukraine will open up arms exports in the near future and whether this will be done publicly remains an open question. I'd like to ask you, what do you think? Is it worth it or not?
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Tensions between Baku and Moscow continue to rise, including in Azerbaijan. The security services have arrested 2 Wagner PMC militants. The Azerbaijani State Security Service detained Ramil Aliyev, born in 1991, and Ismail Hassanov, born in 1974, who fought as part of Wagner. According to the investigation, they participated in combat operations in Ukraine and had experience using weapons and explosives, and also tried to recruit other Azerbaijanis. The men are accused of serious crimes, including intentional murders. Previously, they had been convicted in another country, but were released early after being recruited personally by Prigozhin. Currently, both Wagner fighters have been placed under arrest for 4 months by a court in Baku, and the investigation is ongoing. Earlier, Azerbaijan began mass checks of Russians regarding the purpose of their stay in the country. To put it mildly, the situation is tense. Relations between Azerbaijan and Russia became strained after the events at the end of June. In Russia, 2 Azerbaijani citizens died during their detention. Currently, relations between the countries are deteriorating every day. And it seems that reconciliation between the countries is not on the horizon. Well, what can I say? The enemy of my enemy is my friend, so Azerbaijan has my support. Russians are starting to wake up. Dissatisfaction with the authorities among Russian citizens has reached record levels just in the past week, from 25 to 30% of those surveyed by the Public Opinion Foundation. And this figure continues to grow steadily. So what exactly are Russians so dissatisfied with? What has started to irritate them about the actions of their, until recently, beloved Putin? Let's keep watching.
13.5 trillion rubles just this year, or $144 billion. That's how much the war against Ukraine is costing Russians. These are official figures, and Putin himself confirms them. At the same time, earlier, the head of Ukraine's intelligence, Budanov, stated that every day the treasury of the aggressor country loses nearly $1 billion. These amounts are increasing, but revenues remain the same, if not lower.
What do we have in Russia's budget for the current year? With expected inflation, they say 9.5%, but real inflation will definitely be above 10%. There was an increase in defense spending by 2.3 trillion rubles. And at whose expense was this increase made? At the expense of increasing other budget items. And what did they increase? They increased social spending. Even if it was by 700 billion, it's still an increase. This is despite the fact that even if they had kept social spending at the 2024 level, inflation roughly around 10% would have eaten up that amount anyway. So if you don't take into account that inflation will eat up 10%, and they've also cut social spending, then...
As a result, in order to continue the war, the Kremlin is sacrificing Russians. If at the beginning of the year this isn't so noticeable, by the middle of the year the money runs out and austerity begins. There's already a known case where a 23-year-old woman died due to a lack of money, simply because the Ministry of Health didn't have the funds to purchase medicine. We're talking about Tatiana Drozdova. She had suffered from severe combined immunodeficiency since childhood and became the first person in Russia with such a diagnosis to reach adulthood. And she would have continued to live, but the Kremlin's priority is war. In 2023, doctors prescribed her an expensive medication. A 1-month course costs over 50 million rubles. The regional Ministry of Health refused to purchase it. The young woman sued the state and won. But time passed. Moreover, the Ministry of Health filed an appeal. Tatiana died in June without receiving help.
In May of this year, Tatiana's condition suddenly worsened. She suffered from severe pneumonia twice, complained about her breathing, but did not receive the necessary treatment. She was sent for a fluorography, but was not informed about the detection of another case of pneumonia. The young woman suffered from pain for several days. After several days, she was eventually hospitalized. In the hospital, Tanya was given the same antibiotic that we take, only not in tablets, but intravenously. These medications did not help her recover from pneumonia, and the doctors knew this. My daughter complained to the doctor about severe headaches and partial loss of vision, but the treatment was not changed.
And there will only be more such tragedies soon. After all, as former Russian President Medvedev once said, there is no money, but you hang in there.
I truly believe this significant problem will become very clearly apparent in the fourth quarter of this current year, when it becomes absolutely clear that all the substantial money specifically allocated to the social sector will have been completely spent. Consequently, there will be absolutely no viable way to provide people with any essential medication or crucial insurance coverage.
Talking about any repairs or renovations is completely out of the question. Just think about it. As of 2024, nearly 4,000 schools were not connected to sewage systems. More than 3,400 had no running water, and 3,500 had no central heating. And in the Republic of Tuva, ordinary toilets are considered a luxury. Across the country, 27% of educational institutions are in need of major repairs. Most likely, the situation is even worse now.
In Russia, there are no repairs, no social sector. There simply aren't any resources for this, and no money has been allocated for it in the budget. In fact, they've already said that more and more regions of Russia are finding themselves in a situation where, for example, if a window in an administrative building gets broken, there simply won't be any way to fix it, because that would require resources and none will be allocated. Where from?
On top of everything else, they want to take away the money Russians have earned through their own hard work. The State Duma is already discussing in its second reading a law that would prohibit dacha owners from making money on their plots. That is, even growing potatoes, which has helped many Russians survive. As early as the fall of 2025, this could be considered a violation. The authorities call it a fight against illegal business. But in reality, at the expense of Russians, the Kremlin simply wants to fill its coffers again. And later, of course, spend this money on the war.
For the first time in 17 years, the US has deployed nuclear bombs in Britain. The United States delivered the most advanced version of these bombs to its largest European airbase, which is the main nuclear weapon of the US strategic forces. This is the Lakenheath base in the United Kingdom, which has become the 6th European country to host American nuclear weapons. Our journalists will now explain why this has happened right now.
For the first time in 17 years, Washington has brought weapons of mass destruction to Britain. The United States has delivered to its largest European airbase the most advanced version of bombs, which are the main nuclear weapons of America's strategic forces. However, according to British publications last week, B-61 to 12 thermonuclear bombs were delivered to a newly built secure storage facility at Lakenheath Air Base in eastern England. Consequently, the United Kingdom has now officially achieved the significant and strategic distinction of becoming the 6th sovereign nation within the expansive European continent to undertake the profound and weighty responsibility of hosting nuclear weapons on its own territory, a development that carries considerable geopolitical implications. These particular nuclear armaments are notably formidable in their destructive capacity, possessing an explosive yield that is more than 3 times greater than the devastating atomic bomb that was tragically detonated over the city of Hiroshima during the climactic final stages of the Second World War, a historical event that forever altered the course of human conflict and demonstrated the immense destructive power of such weaponry. Furthermore, it is a well-established and widely acknowledged fact that American nuclear weapons as an integral component of long-standing defense agreements and deeply entrenched strategic alliances have already been securely and continuously stationed at various designated military bases located throughout the United Kingdom for a considerable and extended period, underscoring the enduring strategic partnership between these two nations and highlighting the complex and ever-evolving geopolitical landscape of nuclear deterrence in the modern era, a landscape shaped by historical precedents and ongoing international relations. Lakenheath during the Cold War. However, it was completely removed from there in 2008 as part of arms reduction in Europe. The possible return of nuclear weapons is part of a program for the development and modernization of nuclear facilities. In response to rising tensions with the Kremlin after Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Back in March 2025, Trump called on the Russian Federation and the PRC for nuclear disarmament. However, he did not receive a meaningful political response from either the Russian Federation or accordingly the PRC. And against the backdrop of recent statements by the political leadership of the Russian Federation about the possibility of launching a nuclear strike on the territory of the United Kingdom, as well as the deployment of a significant nuclear arsenal on the territory of that country. This serves as a warning to the Russian Federation and makes it clear that the United States is prepared to respond appropriately to a nuclear threat from the Russian Federation.
Earlier, Russia had already stated that the deployment of American weapons in the United Kingdom would be regarded by Moscow as an escalation and would be met with compensatory countermeasures.
Currently, 5 nuclear facilities are being modernized on the territory of the Russian Federation itself. And this indicates that the Russian Federation is sending a political signal to the United States that it has in fact undermined the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. There are 11 nuclear facilities located on the territory of the Russian Federation. However, problems with the Russian budget, specifically the lack of resources, currently allow for the reconstruction of only 5 facilities. And this is according to the Russian side's own assessment. Once again, Russia has turned these into long-term construction projects and yet more monuments to corruption of the Russian Ministry of Defense.
On the 24th of June, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom announced plans to purchase F-35A fighter jets from the United States, which are capable of carrying aerial bombs, B-61-12. This purchase is the largest strengthening of the United Kingdom's nuclear capability in a generation.
The Chinese company Pop Mart, which produces the collectible Labubu toys, has surpassed Russia's Gazprom in value. Pop Mart International Group is known for its collectible toys, and in particular, the character Labubu has a market capitalization of around $42 billion. This gives the company the 518th place among the most valuable in the world. Meanwhile, the capitalization of the Russian enterprise promises $38.8 billion, which corresponds to the 569th place in the global ranking. And thus, Pop Mart has surpassed one of the world's largest gas exporters in terms of total market value of shares in circulation. In fact, such a rather sharp, the surge in Pop Mart's market value is attributed to increased demand for collectible items, particularly among young audiences in Asia. Meanwhile, the equally sharp decline in the value of Russia's Gazprom is explained by the fact that Russia continues to lose ground due to reduced exports and sanctions pressure. Like this video to support what we do, and be sure to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss our upcoming episodes. See you soon!